All right, here he goes. This is my blog, sci-fi writer, filmmaker, comic book dude, where I just get stuff off my chest. And usually I love to challenge black science fiction writers, different than other writers in other genres, because we write science fiction, and science fiction is a genre that has a different responsibility than other genres. So we have a responsibility to answer the what if questions, right? So and play out different scenarios and speculate about them. Different than romance, different from romance, different from mystery, even urban fiction. None of those genres have the responsibility to speculate about certain things like black science fiction writers do, or science fiction writers have to do in general, right? So today's blog is what are the three big what if questions for black science fiction writers for the year 2020, or just right now, because it's really hard to write and draw a comic book, or write a screenplay and make a movie, or write a book and have it come out this year. You can do it, you know what I'm saying, but it's not that easy, Self-published writers, we can easily do that, So independent filmmakers, we could do a movie in a year. That's not a big deal. All right, so the number, I don't even know if I'm gonna do it in order. These are questions that come from social media and just the world and what we're going through right now in the world. All right. So number one, or let's say, number one, we'll do that in order. What if we moved to Africa? What if African Americans, and I'll throw Caribbeans into the mix, move back to Africa? This 2019, this past last year, we had a big year of return to Ghana, particularly. Now, other places like Gabon and Nigeria and Sierra Leone, they also have visitation by people like Cardi B, Ludacris, and I forgot the actor's name, Isaiah Washington. But Ghana last year saw hundreds of celebrities and African American people going back. They even recorded that they accepted 198 or something citizens from the African American community or from the diaspora, and it was really big, so it was a real big push. But we've been going back to Africa for a while. I even joke and say, when I first went to Ghana in '92, we were part of the Bantu tribe. Now the Bantu tribe is bursting at its seams, meaning we've been to Africa. That was the name of the tribe. Anyway, what would that be like, right? What would Africa be like in a diasporic, repopulated experience? What would it be like for the immigrants from America, right? I have a story, and I'm still keeping the name. I don't care if anybody steals it, but I had a story that I wrote when I first started writing, a title that I wrote when I first started writing, called American Refugee. And I joked that the opening chapter would be set in a place called Harlem Town. And it would be all types of different things that represented Harlem. Maybe it would be American Town, and Harlem would just be one bar. And we would have an Atlanta, we would have a little Philly, a Chicago thing. Who knows, but I live in Miami, and Miami is a city of immigrants. I am a migrant from New Jersey, and I feel like a migrant in a city of immigrants, and it's crazy. So I have a lot of friends who lived in other countries, and because of economic, political challenges, they moved to America. I have Trinidadian, Jamaican, and Cuban neighbors, and then when I taught school, I had everybody, in there. I even lost students, during the ICE promotion that Donald Trump was putting together. I have Venezuelan students coming here during the collapse of that. So it's just real telling. And everybody in South Florida has Haitian students. So just wondering, what would that be like? All right, so number two. One more thing I would like to add. In the number one, what would it be like going back to Africa? I think the other question is, how would we mix with our African brothers and sisters? For me, it always feels sort of like a nightmare sometimes when I think of the things that African Americans do to other countries, particularly, dealing with women and the porn industry and all of the sex elements. We've become so sex prioritized. Just my opinion, right? When you think of places like Brazil, you think of places like Dominican Republic, it is not necessarily, let's go back and reconnect and merge with the culture. It's usually, you can go over there and get a woman to do a lot of different things than what the women over here in America do. And I would hate to see that be the outcome, right, of going back to Africa. I had friends that post, questions, look at all these women in Africa, I gotta go now. And I'm like, oh my God. However, the saving grace feeling is that Africans are more culturally stable than Africans in the continent, right, are more culturally stable than Africans in the diaspora. Now, in America, you may still see skin bleaching. You may see the African Nicki Minaj, the Nigerian Nicki Minaj. You may hear in Nigeria they got strip clubs, and now they got more than just comedy clubs, but they got those elements too. And yeah, I think there is an element of the outside world that has impacted or that impacts Africa, but then you'll see headlines where, people are fighting back. Take your, not necessarily on the homophobic tip, but just giving that as an example, they're bringing in homosexuality, right, with them. And there's, so there's been some pushback on American values to Africa. And while I think some of them aren't good that we bring with us, I think there is something that Africans can gain from Africans throughout the diaspora. My main thing is, our awareness of external people, you know what I'm saying? Not just Europeans, but we ain't trying to trust nobody because we have a history that we need to learn from of what they can do to us. So all of those things would be a part of, if we go back to Africa, what it would be like, how we would mix. I'm not one I have friends that went to black colleges, and the black people in the town, they would call them stickmen, right? Especially, if you went to Hampton or Norfolk in Virginia, and they use different terms for them, right? And they would have problems with the African Americans that came and go to college in their area, and there would be a lot of conflicts. You see it played out in the movie School Days, and Spike Lee's movie. I don't see that necessarily happening in Africa, or at least in Ghana. I can't speak for South Africa and Nigeria, not because I didn't go, but because I think they are a lot more modernized than Ghana. All right, number two, we got to move fast because I don't have a lot of time. What if America had a second civil war? I think this is the Donald Trump question. This is the burning question that, I don't think it's been played out in the TV show The Watchmen. But I think, I have a post-apocalyptic series, right? My post-apocalyptic series, I want to deal with all of the different post-apocalyptic scenarios. And Civil War is one that comes into play in my Harlem Shake series. Check it out, Harlem Shake series, African American post-apocalyptic series. But Ava DuVernay has picked up the directorial rights for a comic book called the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. Brian Woods, a white writer who wrote this. I think he's got an African American illustrator, but I still think the story is told from a white person's perspective. And I would love to see the story told from an African American perspective. One of the stories that I always tell people and remind people is science fiction is The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And so I always wanted to write a day after The Spook Who Sat by the Door, months after, 20 days later, 28 months later after The Spook Who Sat by the Door, just to play that scenario out. Not only after the war, but leading up to it. All of the elements from an African American point of view. I know my man Robert Jeffrey in Atlanta has a series that he had done, and the name escapes me, right? Radio Free America, right? That was post-apocalypse. But I think it was still very post-apocalypse and not really leading up to it. I know they had another one out of California called Genius, and that was a little bit of an uprising. I know, LeVar Burton had a series, a novel, I think it was called Aftermath, and it was after the post-apocalypse. So, and it really dealt with different types of post-apocalyptic events as opposed to a Second World War. So I want to I think we need to deal with racial tension. I think we need to deal with it in a real, seriously speculative way that owns our experiences in that post-apocalyptic experience. Not something just America. I want it to be how it impacts Atlanta, how it impacts Philly, how it impacts LA. You understand? So that's what I'm thinking. All right. And then the third one is what if aliens invade Earth? My favorite science fiction book, Zorro, A Tale of Alien Avengers, plays this out. This is something that I have always said that we interpret differently between African Americans and other cultures around the planet. And this is probably even something that we differ with Africans on the continent. But I think regardless of how different we view it, I think it's important for us to explore it, or more of us to explore it. I think when we see reports of how much the U.S. and other countries, European countries, are spending on space defense systems, I think it's important. I wrote an article called African Americans Are Hoodwinked on Space. And that is because I think, I speculated about the potential connection between the builders of the pyramids and the people who images are in the pyramids and that culture on the Nile being African American, and the possibility that aliens may be African, right? Black African, right? Or Africans are descendants of those aliens. And if they come back, they would be able to reconnect with us in ways that may not be acceptable to the cultures that are dominating the earth right now. And that really is the setup for the book Zorro, A Tale of Alien Avengers. And I probably have to just put that up as a PDF and gift it to people, because it's not in print anymore, and the copies are selling for like $3,000, and there's nobody gonna buy it. Even though it's probably worth $3,000, if there was ever a book, I would suggest that one. But I'm not paying $3,000 for it. All right, that's it. Let me read them back. Number 1, what if we move to Africa? Number 2, if America has a second civil war. And 3, what if the aliens came to Earth? And those are the big questions that we need to write about in Black Sci-Fi in the year 2020. My recommendations. Peace.